There was something sacred about Sundays in mid-century America. The world slowed down, church bells echoed, the radio hummed softly, and kitchens filled with the scent of casseroles, pies, and mulled salads that gleamed like jewels on the table. Families came together not for the fancy, but for the familiar, dishes that told stories of care, patience, and pride. But time has a way of sweeping even the sweetest traditions off the table. The recipes that once defined the American Sunday, creamy torts, savory molds, and salads shaped in glistening rings, have nearly vanished from our cookbooks and our memories. Today, we are opening the doors to that forgotten Sunday kitchen. From banana coconut tort to spinach ring casserole, these are the 12 lost Betty Crocker era creations that once made Sundays feel complete, and now, they are ready to be remembered. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, take a seat by the window, and let us travel back to a time when Sunday meals were more than food, they were a feeling. There was a time when Sundays in America were marked by the scent of coconut and vanilla drifting from the kitchen, a sign that something special was being prepared. That something was the banana coconut tort, a dessert so light and luscious that it felt like sunshine captured in layers. Housewives in the 1950s reserved it for the end of a Sunday meal, often placing it proudly at the center of the table, shimmering beneath a soft dusting of coconut flakes. This tort was not a showy dessert, it was humble yet heavenly. Each layer began with tender sponge cake or crushed vanilla wafers, brushed gently with banana puree. Then came the velvety filling, whipped cream folded with sugar, sliced bananas, and flakes of sweet coconut. Chilled overnight, it transformed into something almost ethereal, the flavors merging into a single, dreamy sweetness that tasted like home. It was a dessert that spoke of patience, made in quiet kitchens where mothers and grandmothers worked by instinct rather than recipe cards. On Sundays, when families gathered after church, laughter filled the dining room, and the first slice of banana coconut tort always drew silence, that quiet awe before the first bite. As decades passed, instant puddings and boxed mixes replaced slow-made torts like this. The tradition faded, tucked away in yellowed cookbooks and fading memories. Yet those who remember it say its flavor was unforgettable, the perfect balance of fruit and cream, nostalgia and comfort. So if you ever find yourself longing for a taste of a true American Sunday, try reviving the banana coconut tort. It is not just dessert, it is a memory on a plate, waiting to be shared again. There was a time in America when desserts were more than just sweetness on a plate, they were symbols of care, patience, and quiet pride. The old-fashioned prune whip was one of those forgotten treasures. It graced Sunday tables not because it was fancy, but because it represented something deeper, the belief that even simple things, made with love, could bring families together. In kitchens lit by soft afternoon light, the process began with a saucepan and a handful of dried prunes. They were simmered gently in water until tender, filling the room with a deep, honeyed aroma that mingled with the scent of Sunday roasts. Once cooled, the prunes were mashed into a smooth paste, thick, glossy, and rich with natural sweetness. Then came the most delicate step, folding the prune mixture into stiffly beaten egg whites and a dusting of sugar. Slowly, the dark fruit turned pale and airy, transforming into a shimmering purple-brown cloud that looked as light as breath itself. The whip was baked slowly, not rushed, its surface turning golden and crisp while the inside stayed soft and creamy. When served cold, often with a drizzle of custard or a dollop of whipped cream, it carried an old-world grace. It was both rich and light, sweet yet surprisingly wholesome. In those mid-century homes, it was the dessert that mothers prepared when they wanted to stretch ingredients, when luxury was found not in what was bought but in what was made by hand. On quiet Sunday afternoons, it was the final note of a meal filled with conversation, laughter, and peace. But as time marched on, desserts became quicker, flashier, and sweeter. The prune whip faded away, a relic of slower days. Yet those who once tasted it remember its tenderness, its subtle flavor, and the care it required. Bringing it back today is not just reviving a recipe, it is restoring a rhythm, a reminder that good things, like family and tradition, are built slowly. There was something about mid-century Sundays that felt softer. The world seemed to slow down just enough for people to notice the little things. The cherry cheese ring was one of those small joys that brightened the table. Not too rich, not too fussy, just the perfect blend of sweet and savory that made people pause and smile. This dish was as much about beauty as taste. Picture it, a creamy ring of whipped cream cheese, gently folded with chopped pecans, crushed pineapple, and a hint of lemon. It was molded carefully, chilled until firm, then placed on a glass platter where its edges gleamed like ivory. In the center, a bright cherry filling waited, tart, glistening, and ruby red. The contrast was stunning, cool cream against vibrant fruit, richness against brightness. For many families, it became a Sunday favorite, served with crackers before dinner or as a light dessert afterward. Housewives loved it because it looked elegant but came together with ease. There was no baking, no fussing, just a quiet kind of perfection. Guests always asked for the recipe, and it spread from neighborhood to neighborhood through handwritten cards and clipped magazine pages. As the years went on, dishes like this slipped out of fashion. Gelatin molds and cream cheese rings were replaced by newer trends, and the cherry cheese ring became one of those forgotten creations, too simple to impress, too nostalgic to forget. But for those who remember, it still carries the taste of conversation-filled afternoons, of laughter echoing through a sunlit dining room, and of food made with care, not convenience. Reviving it today feels like bringing back a little piece of that calm, a reminder that sometimes, the best recipes are not the ones that dazzle, but the ones that make us feel at home. The cherry cheese ring does exactly that, quietly, gracefully, and with a sweetness that lingers long after Sunday fades. There was a time when salads were not just greens tossed in a bowl, they were art. The olive ring salad was one of those showpieces, gleaming proudly on mid-century Sunday tables across America. It was the kind of dish that drew eyes before it drew forks, its glossy surface catching the light like stained glass. In the 1950s and early 1960s, mold salads were a sign of sophistication. The olive ring combined savory charm with a touch of elegance. Its base was a smooth blend of mayonnaise, lemon juice, and unflavored gelatin, a creamy suspension that held finely chopped celery, pimentos, and, of course, green olives. Once poured into a ring mold and chilled overnight, it set into a shimmering circle, cool, firm, and satisfyingly precise. At the center, cooks often filled the hollow with crisp lettuce or even a scoop of tuna or chicken salad, making it as practical as it was pretty. On Sunday afternoons, this dish carried a sense of occasion. It was served beside baked ham, roasted chicken, or deviled eggs, foods that spoke of togetherness and care. Guests admired its design before taking a bite, then discovered a surprising mix of flavors, the brine of olives, the crunch of celery, the creamy smoothness that tied it all together. It was daring for its time, sophisticated, even playful. As trends changed, dishes like the olive ring salad were quietly set aside. The gelatin era faded, and so did the patience it required. But if you listen closely to the memories of those who lived through that golden kitchen age, you can still hear the laughter, the clinking dishes, and the quiet pride of a hostess unveiling her perfect salad ring. Revisiting the olive ring salad today is like opening a time capsule, one filled with charm, creativity, and the flavor of a Sunday long gone. It reminds us that presentation once mattered as much as taste, and that both could be made with simple, genuine care. There was a moment in American food history when creativity knew no limits, when home cooks mold everything from fruit to vegetables into gleaming masterpieces. Among them stood the broccoli cheese mold, a dish that made even humble broccoli feel elegant enough for a Sunday table. This was no ordinary casserole. It began with tender-cooked broccoli, finely chopped until it blended smoothly with shredded cheddar, a touch of mayonnaise, and lemon juice. Then came the key, unflavored gelatin, the secret ingredient that gave it shape and grace. The mixture was poured into a decorative mold, chilled until firm, and turned out like a jewel, a golden green ring, gleaming and proud. When sliced, it revealed soft specks of broccoli suspended in a creamy, savory base that melted in the mouth. On Sunday afternoons, this dish often sat beside baked chicken, glazed ham, or even roast beef. Housewives adored it because it offered a vegetable in disguise, nutritious yet festive, simple yet striking. Children, who normally resisted anything green, found themselves curious about this bright, bouncy ring that looked almost too pretty to eat. It was the kind of creation that made guests smile, a bridge between elegance and comfort. In the 1960s, mold dishes were a reflection of optimism, food that looked like celebration. But as decades changed and trends leaned toward speed over spectacle, the broccoli cheese mold quietly disappeared. Gelatin lost its glamour, and with it went a generation of inventive, patient cooking. Yet for those who remember, this dish carries a tender nostalgia, a taste of Sunday meals that celebrated family, creativity, and pride in presentation. It was proof that vegetables could be art, and that mealtime could still feel special, even on an ordinary weekend. Reviving the broccoli cheese mold today is more than cooking from the past, it is honoring an era when food was made to delight the eyes as much as the heart. There was something quietly refreshing about Sunday meals in mid-century America, a sense of balance between indulgence and simplicity. The cottage cheese apple salad captured that spirit perfectly. It was cool, light, and comforting, the kind of dish that brought a smile after a long, hearty meal. This salad was the definition of simple beauty. It began with crisp, diced apples, red or green, depending on the season, tossed gently with creamy cottage cheese. Then came a touch of sweetness, crushed pineapple or a drizzle of honey, followed by a handful of chopped walnuts for texture. Sometimes a spoonful of mayonnaise or a dash of lemon juice tied it all together, creating a bright, slightly tangy flavor that danced on the tongue. Served on a bed of crisp lettuce leaves, it looked like sunshine on a plate, fresh, clean, and wholesome. On Sundays, this salad offered something different, a break from the richness of casseroles and roasts. It was often served as a side dish or even a light dessert. Mothers loved it because it was nutritious, children liked it because it tasted like fruit and cream. In many homes, it was one of those quiet traditions, not grand or flashy, but always remembered. As time moved on, salads like this faded away. Instant dressings and prepackaged mixes replaced the small joys of stirring together something fresh. Yet the memory of the cottage cheese apple salad still lingers, not for its complexity, but for its charm. It was a dish that reflected care without effort, sweetness without excess. To taste it again is to step back into a slower Sunday, one where meals were made by hand, and flavor was found in the simplest things. The cottage cheese apple salad was never about perfection, it was about peace, served in a bowl of comfort and light. There was a time when the clink of pickle jars in an American kitchen meant something special, a signal that flavor and freshness were about to meet. The sweet pickle salad was born from that moment, a bright, tangy creation that once graced countless Sunday tables. It was the kind of dish that balanced sweetness and zest, offering a refreshing contrast to the heavy comfort foods that defined the day. This salad began with something humble, a diced sweet pickles, finely chopped hard-boiled eggs, and crisp celery for crunch. Then came the smoothness, a dressing made from mayonnaise, a touch of mustard, and a spoonful of sweet pickle juice for that signature tang. Sometimes, a bit of minced onion or pimento added a gentle kick, giving it just enough complexity without losing its simplicity. When chilled, it came together as a creamy, bright, and slightly nostalgic blend, a dish that belonged to summer picnics and Sunday luncheons alike. For many American families, it was more than a side, it was a tradition. The sweet pickle salad appeared alongside baked ham, fried chicken, or sandwiches made from leftover roast. Its cheerful flavor seemed to lift the table, offering a burst of brightness that cut through rich gravies and casseroles. Housewives took pride in getting the balance just right, not too sweet, not too sour, but perfectly in between. As time passed, the salad slowly disappeared, replaced by factory-made relishes and convenience foods. but those who grew up in that golden kitchen era still remember its flavor, that gentle sweetness that hinted at care, at home, at Sunday afternoons when everything felt right in the world. To make it again is to taste a chapter of American simplicity, a time when recipes did not need flair to feel special. The sweet pickle salad was proof that joy could come from the smallest spoonfuls, and that love could be tasted in something as humble as a jar of pickles. There was a kind of quiet pride that filled mid-century American kitchens, the kind that came from pulling something delicate, daring, and golden from the oven. The cheese souffle loaf was exactly that kind of triumph. Light yet rich, humble yet impressive, it was a Sunday masterpiece that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary. Unlike the towering French souffle, this dish had an American heart, practical, hearty, and made to share. It began with a smooth base of white sauce, butter, flour, and milk whisked into silky perfection. Into that, cooks folded generous handfuls of sharp cheddar cheese, melting it down until it glowed like sunshine. Then came the eggs, yolks for richness, whites beaten stiff for lift, creating a mixture that felt almost alive under the spoon. Poured into a loaf pan, the batter rose slowly in the oven, turning golden at the edges, puffing proudly at the top. When sliced, it revealed a texture so tender it nearly melted on the tongue, warm, airy, and filled with the scent of real cheese and home. Some homemakers served it with creamed vegetables, others with ham or a side of tomato relish, but always with admiration. It was more than a recipe, it was a statement that patience and care could turn everyday ingredients into something beautiful. On quiet Sunday afternoons, this loaf was a centerpiece, not for its extravagance, but for its comfort. Families gathered around the table, the loaf steaming gently as butter melted into each slice. Over time, it faded from the spotlight, replaced by quicker casseroles and boxed mixes. But the cheese souffle loaf remains one of those forgotten marvels, proof that good food does not need to shout to be remembered. Bake it once, and you will understand why it earned a place on those cherished Sunday tables, light as air, rich as memory, and warm as home itself. On quiet Sunday afternoons in mid-century America, when families gathered around tables dressed with linen and laughter, there was often a dish that surprised newcomers, the spinach ring casserole. It looked elegant, shaped in a perfect ring, yet it carried the comforting, earthy flavor of home-cooked greens. This wasn't just any vegetable side. It was a clever creation from the 1950s, when homemakers loved turning everyday ingredients into something worthy of admiration. Cooked spinach was blended with eggs, bread crumbs, melted butter, and a bit of grated cheese, then poured into a ring mold and baked until firm. The result was soft inside, golden at the edges, and rich with a delicate, savory aroma that made the whole kitchen feel warm and inviting. When brought to the table, the spinach ring wasn't complete until its hollow center was filled, sometimes with creamed mushrooms, sometimes with buttered carrots or pearl onions. It was both practical and beautiful, a centerpiece that turned a simple vegetable into a Sunday showpiece. For many families, it symbolized pride, proof that even humble spinach could be transformed into something elegant with a little patience and creativity. It offered comfort after church, a way to balance rich meats and gravies with something wholesome and green. Today, the spinach ring casserole stands as a forgotten art, a glimpse into an era when presentation was part of love, and every dish told a story about care and togetherness. To make it again is to honor that spirit, to bring back the calm rhythm of Sunday kitchens, the laughter of family dinners, and the quiet joy of food made from the heart. In the quiet comfort of post-war America, Sunday tables gleamed with dishes that blended simplicity with grace. One of those elegant creations was the creamed peas timbale, a forgotten gem that made even humble peas feel like a celebration. A timbale sounded fancy, but in truth, it was just a mold dish, soft, savory, and beautifully shaped. Housewives of the 1940s and 50s loved serving it when guests came over for Sunday supper. The recipe began with tender green peas folded into a creamy white sauce made from butter, milk, and a touch of flour. A few whisked eggs gave it body, and when baked gently in a ring mold, it emerged light, velvety, and golden on top. The true magic happened at serving time. In the center of the timbale, a pool of rich mushroom sauce or buttered breadcrumbs added texture and aroma. It wasn't loud or showy, just quietly elegant, like the Sundays it belonged to. Families admired how something as modest as peas could be transformed into a dish that felt refined. It represented a time when home cooks found pride in presentation, and meals were slow, shared, and full of meaning. Today, the creamed peas timbale reminds us that beauty in food does not come from extravagance but from care, from taking the time to turn simple ingredients into something that brings comfort and connection. It was the taste of calm after a busy week, a soft note of love on a quiet afternoon. There was something magical about Sundays in mid-century America, the day when ovens cooled, families slowed down, and desserts waited patiently in the refrigerator. Among those chilled treasures sat a forgotten delight, the peanut butter refrigerator cake, a no-bake masterpiece that blended sweetness, simplicity, and a touch of nostalgia. This cake was born in an era when convenience met creativity. Housewives discovered that a box of graham crackers, a few spoonfuls of creamy peanut butter, and whipped cream could become something extraordinary. No oven, no fuss, just patience and love. Layer by layer, the crackers softened beneath clouds of peanut butter filling, transforming overnight into a cake so tender it melted with every bite. It carried the spirit of a restful Sunday, effortless, comforting, and perfectly sweet without being fussy. Some added a drizzle of chocolate syrup on top, others sprinkled crushed peanuts for a rustic touch. But no matter the variation, it was always served cold, straight from the fridge, with that first cool bite reminding everyone that joy could come from the simplest of things. Mothers made it ahead for family gatherings, kids peeked into the refrigerator every few hours, waiting for the magic to set. And when it finally did, the whole house seemed to pause, forks tapping gently, smiles spreading slowly. Today, the peanut butter refrigerator cake is a forgotten whisper from a gentler time, proof that good food does not need grandeur. It just needs warmth, patience, and the love that lingers long after Sunday fades into evening. On slow Sunday mornings, when sunlight spilled softly through lace curtains and the smell of coffee filled every corner of the house, there was one treat that completed the moment, the chocolate chip coffee cake. It was not just breakfast and not quite dessert, but something beautifully in between, warm, comforting, and meant to be shared. This was the kind of cake that waited quietly on the kitchen counter, baked early before church or family visits. Its base was a buttery, tender crumb, sweet but not overwhelming, and sprinkled throughout were generous handfuls of chocolate chips that melted just enough to leave little pockets of joy in every slice. A cinnamon sugar crumble on top added a gentle crunch, the kind that made you close your eyes with the first bite. In homes across 1950s and 1960s America, this cake was a symbol of togetherness. Mothers poured coffee into floral cups, fathers read the Sunday paper, and children reached for the warmest slice before it cooled. It was simple, but it carried a quiet sense of celebration, a reminder that comfort did not always need occasion. Sometimes, it was baked in a square pan, other times in a bundt mold for something a little more special. But no matter how it was made, the smell alone could pull everyone into the kitchen. Today, the chocolate chip coffee cake feels like a memory from another lifetime, when time moved slower, and sweetness was measured in moments, not sugar. To bake it again is to bring that peaceful Sunday rhythm back to life, one soft, chocolatey bite at a time. There was a time when Sundays felt like sunshine, slow, golden, and filled with comfort. After church, families gathered around their tables, the scent of roast still lingering, while one dessert brought brightness to the afternoon, the orange cream cake. This cake was pure joy captured in layers. It began with a soft, golden sponge, tender and airy, infused with the zest of fresh oranges. The fragrance alone lifted spirits. Between each layer rested a smooth, creamy filling made from whipped cream and frozen orange juice concentrate, light, tangy, and perfectly balanced. When assembled, it was finished with a glossy orange glaze that shimmered like sunlight, giving the whole cake a soft, cheerful glow. It was a dessert that did not demand celebration. It simply appeared, quietly elegant, on those easy Sunday afternoons when coffee brewed and conversation drifted lazily through the room. Housewives of the 1950s often served it chilled, letting the citrus cream settle overnight, turning it into something that tasted like the season itself, cool, delicate, and endlessly refreshing. For children, the first slice was magic. The knife glided through the soft layers, releasing a sweet burst of orange scent that filled the kitchen. For mothers, it was pride, a homemade creation that felt like sunshine on a plate. Today, the orange cream cake feels like a postcard from another era when desserts carried emotion, not extravagance. It was a simple joy, the kind that made Sunday afternoons last a little longer. Bringing it back is more than a recipe revival. It is an invitation to slow down, to smile, and to savor the small, golden moments that make life feel whole again. On quiet Sunday afternoons in mid-century America, when time moved slower and the smell of coffee filled the kitchen, one dessert stood as a symbol of warmth and care: the butterscotch pudding loaf. It was sweet, tender, and full of that deep caramel flavor that felt like a hug in every bite. This loaf was not flashy, but it had character. The recipe called for simple pantry ingredients: brown sugar, butter, milk, and eggs, whisked together with a packet of instant butterscotch pudding mix, the shortcut every 1960s homemaker adored. The pudding gave it a golden hue and a soft, velvety texture that stayed moist for days. When baked, the house filled with the cozy aroma of caramel and vanilla, the kind that pulled every family member into the kitchen before it even cooled. Sliced thick and served warm with a pat of butter or a drizzle of cream, it turned ordinary Sundays into something special. Some families added chopped nuts or a dusting of powdered sugar, while others kept it plain, letting the butterscotch flavor speak for itself. It was a loaf meant for sharing, with neighbors stopping by, children sneaking seconds, and mothers smiling quietly as plates emptied. There was no rush, no noise, just the soft rhythm of forks and conversation. Today, the butterscotch pudding loaf feels like a gentle echo from another time, when desserts carried comfort, not excess. To bake it again is to bring that feeling back: the sound of laughter, the scent of sugar melting in butter, and the peace of knowing Sunday would always end on a sweet note. In the heart of 1940s and 1950s America, when Sunday dinners felt like small celebrations, one humble dessert quietly won hearts: the pineapple cottage pudding. It was not fancy or complicated, yet it carried the taste of sunshine and comfort in every spoonful. This pudding began with the simplicity of a golden sponge, soft, buttery, and baked until just firm enough to cradle its topping. The real charm, however, came from the sauce: a warm, glossy mixture of crushed pineapple, sugar, and a touch of lemon juice, simmered until fragrant and spooned generously over each serving. It soaked gently into the cake, creating that perfect balance of sweetness and tang that made every bite melt like summer on the tongue. Families loved it because it was easy, thrifty, and full of flavor, the kind of dessert that stretched what little ingredients they had into something memorable. Mothers often made it on quiet Sundays, when the pace of the day slowed and the kitchen smelled like fruit and comfort. Children waited eagerly, spoons ready, watching the steam rise from the pudding as it was served warm, often with a drizzle of cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top. It was a dish that didn't need decoration; its beauty was in its honesty. Simple ingredients, lovingly prepared, brought people together after long weeks of work and worry. Today, the pineapple cottage pudding reminds us that home cooking was never about perfection; it was about presence, about showing love through the smallest gestures. To bake it again is to taste a sweeter, slower America, one where Sunday meant good food, shared stories, and the comforting promise of another week ahead. There was a special kind of magic in mid-century kitchens, where creativity met necessity, and sweetness was often born from simplicity. One shining example of that spirit was the caramel cornflake pie, a forgotten Sunday dessert that turned breakfast cereal into a golden treasure. This pie began not with flour and butter, but with crushed cornflakes, gently mixed with sugar and melted butter to form a crisp, toasty crust. It was pressed into a pie dish and baked just long enough to hold its shape, crunchy on the edges, soft at the base, and filled with the rich scent of caramelized grains. The filling was pure comfort, a glossy blend of brown sugar, butter, vanilla, and a touch of cream, simmered until thick and velvety. Once poured into the crust, it set into a smooth, amber filling that caught the light like honey. Many homemakers added chopped nuts or a sprinkle of salt to balance the sweetness, while others drizzled chocolate over the top for an extra touch of indulgence. But what made the caramel cornflake pie so memorable was not just its flavor, it was its charm. It was the kind of dessert children could help create, measuring and stirring with sticky fingers. Families served it at Sunday dinners, picnics, and potlucks, often with a dollop of whipped cream on top and laughter all around. Today, it stands as a tribute to American ingenuity, a dessert that proved joy could come from even the humblest pantry shelf. To taste it again is to remember those golden afternoons, when the week's worries faded, and sweetness filled the room like sunlight through a kitchen window.